All right, guys. Darnell Mooney. We're talking his dynasty value tonight, but let's get a little baseline. Go over a couple trades here. So, would you rather have Darnell Mooney or the 108?
108.
Pick.
What about Darnell Mooney or his teammate David Montgomery?
Montgomery.
Yeah,
running back. Montgomery.
Running back, because I probably need him on my roster.
What about Darnell Mooney or Elijah Mitchell?
You know what? I'm going to go with Elijah Mitchell. As much as I'm a little wary, I think that they're both in a low enough range where I'd rather have the positional scarcity. I think I can probably buy a cheaper version of Mooney's production, cheaper than I could buy an Elijah Mitchell.
I was banking on Mitchell producing and being the starting running back. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm taking the running back still.
Okay, what about Darnell Mooney and the 204 or Devontae Smith?
Ooh, I'm still taking Devontae Smith.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's actually a pretty good trade because I could see the appeal of the Mooney and the 204 side because you're going to add Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Spiller, Trey McBride. Like, you probably are not going to get a receiver that maybe David Bell falls there, but like you're probably able to supplement your other positions. Be Malik Willis. I mean, you can do a lot more with that 204, whether you like the 204 or not. I kind of like the 2-for-1 there.
Yeah, so let's get going. So we're going to talk about what we do if we were trying to buy him. We're going to talk about what we do if we're trying to sell him. So Scott, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, when you decided that we were going to talk about Darnell Mooney, because I know the subscribers really want to talk about Darnell Mooney.
We're going to talk about Darnell Mooney.
A lot of comments on let's do Mooney. Let's talk Mooney. He's a tough one because I think it felt like his value spiked up and then it kind of faded down a little bit when people, figured, hey, the Bears are going to get somebody else. Then they really didn't. Looking at just last year, I mean, I know Shane has some more numbers to share, but I mean, he was one of the few guys that had 25% or more market share, 26.6%. Like DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin, his catch rate was extremely bad, less than 60%. I believe there was only 3 players in the league that ended up with like more than 140 targets, but less than a 60% catch rate. Mike Clay released his projections. There's a lot of people that do projections, but I kind of like to look at his because it's all in one spot. He's probably coming up with the same process year after year after year. And he has Darnell Mooney this year at 133 targets, and he has him basically at wide receiver 22. So, I mean, maybe a little bit better than what he finished last year, but I mean, not nearly difference making. He's just adding a placeholder spot in a flex spot or in one of your wide receiver spots. What's it going to look like if the Bears end up getting a couple better weapons in the next year or two? If he has a bad year or a year where he doesn't live up to expectations, he will sink further than other players that are currently in his range.
Right. Because
he was a day 3 receiver. He's a guy that the community is a little slower to buy into. I'm willing to kind of buy into him after what he showed in his rookie year and then what he showed last year. Like, I think he's probably established that he's a baseline wide receiver 3 or better for the NFL. We'll get into the buys. I do think he is one of those players. He's one of those receivers that's in a range where if I'm in on Mooney, I kind of want to do it on teams where I have Fields. So whether you have Mooney and you don't have Fields or you have Fields and you want to go after Mooney, I think this is one of those stacks where it's like, man, if you have Mooney and you can't trade him, you can't even get like a 24 first for him, or you can't swap him for any of those receivers that Clay brought up. Like, you can't get Allen Robinson or Marquise Brown or anybody like that you would say, okay, maybe they're in a similar range. Go get Fields. Or if you have Fields, go get Mooney. Like, this is the type of team when everyone's kind of fading. They're like, the Bears stink. Like, okay, yeah, Mooney might be the leader in targets, but the offense isn't going to be great. They're not helping Fields. Like, this is the kind of team you just go get Mooney and Fields. And you go down with the ship one way or the other.
Even if he goes out and smashes next year, he gets another 140 targets. He's going to probably jump up to 13.4 points a game, maybe on 140 targets. He doesn't move the needle at all. Like, he's someone that I want to add to him and go get a real receiver. And that's no disrespect to him specifically. That's just disrespecting all wide receiver 3s. They don't matter. Start 13, sure. And start 9, I hope you're shooting for better upside. He's got a limited skill set. He's not a legitimate wide receiver 1 on any professional offense. He will be a wide receiver 1 on the Bears offense. So even if you wanted to hold him for the first few weeks of next season and then trade him, I'm fine with that. But you got to get out of him before the 2023 season comes, because there's absolutely no way the Bears can go through another offseason with Darnell Mooney as their wide receiver 1. That's fine as a wide receiver 3. You know, if he's my wide receiver 4 on my team, I'm feeling really excited.
But one thing with Mooney is, even if he does go out and smash, and Fields is really good, like we all kind of want that to happen, you know, like I want Fields to be good. That means Mooney's probably going to be good. He's still going to face a negative narrative from the community next year when they draft a receiver in the first round or sign one in free agency. He's going to face almost a downswing no matter what he does.
Okay, so let's do another trade. Would you go Darnell Mooney and the 110 or AJ Brown?
AJ Brown.
Yeah, as much as I love the 2-for-1s where I get 2 shots at receiver, I'll take Brown because he's the opposite of Mooney. He can be wide receiver 30 and people will buy back next year because they're like, oh, Eagles are going to get a better quarterback and he's going to smash because he signed a big contract. So that's a great example of like a player that literally could get outproduced by Mooney and their values could go in the opposite directions.
So if you wanted to buy Darnell Mooney, how would you go about doing it?
I'm not as anti adding Mooney to rosters as Shane. Like even in start 10, start 11, I'm okay adding to him as like one of my stable of receivers that I can throw in there, you know, even if he's my wide receiver 5 or 6. I think what he allows me to do is, if I have an active league, he allows me to maybe buy him and then maybe sell a guy that I want to bet against that's worth more. And I can maybe get a profit and I don't lose a lot of short-term production. Probably can start with a 23 second or maybe a receiver that is even further down than Mooney that I don't believe in. Kadarius Toney is another one that's getting a little bit buzz now. Again, I would sell Kadarius Toney for Darnell Mooney. Christian Watson is another one. Like, I just haven't been in on Christian Watson. So, like, if I can sell a guy like that and I have to add like a third, I'm okay getting Mooney that way.
And if you're a big buyer. You're a big buyer.
He's not buying
Darnell Mooney.
No.
All right. Well, let's start with you. Let's start with you in terms of, let's move over to sell strategy. If you were selling Darnell Mooney.
Yeah.
How would you approach it other than just asking for any third?
Well, I mean, I'm going to add a second to him and just scroll up. All right, so he's a wide receiver 3. What can I get in the wide receiver 2 range?
I'll give you Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you give me Mooney in a second.
No, the problem with Amon-Ra St. Brown is that
he's Darnell Mooney.
Yeah.
I think I just probably a running back too, right? Like I could see trading Mooney for anyone like in the Fournette range. Anyone in the Leonard Fournette range, and I would be okay with that, knowing that, look, I probably get a year production out of the guy, and then I got to reload next year. Because, again, I don't think that I'm going to get high-end production out of Mooney, and I could be wrong. And even if I do, I can't imagine it's anything more than a year.
I was thinking another deal, like, would you trade another guy that's impossible to sell, Keenan Allen or Mooney in a 23 second?
I'm going to take Keenan Allen, and I'm using the same principle that I used for the running back. I might only get 1 year of production out of him, but the production's going to be really good.
I mean, I think that's the kind of receiver that you could probably sell a contender that is okay giving up a free second. You know what I mean? Because that's a player you already know what Keenan Allen is. Yep. He's 30. You know that basically I've tried to even sell him for 24 firsts. I can't get it.
Yeah. No,
so it's just, he's not worth a first, truthfully. 90% of leagues, he's not worth a first. Yet if you have him on your roster, you're like, damn, I'm excited. He could be a top 15 receiver. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big gap between like redraft value and dynasty ADP. So I think he's a good type to pivot off to Mooney if he wanted to.
So would you take Darnell Mooney and a 2023 second or a 23 first?
Oh, I'm taking the 23 first. That's
23 first. 23 first.
Just confirming.
I was going to flip it back around. You give a 24 first and Mooney, and you get a 23.
I'm taking the 23 first.
I'll take the 23 first.